And I think it really helps people understand why when they jump to methods without the preceding work, sure, you can make changes, but often those changes aren't long lasting. Do you know what I mean? You can do it. This is like your classic January 2 or 3 week burst where you're doing the methods that you've learnt about, but you haven't upgraded the mindset. You haven't upgraded your belief system. So I really, really like that approach. It's interesting hearing about your REMs. I have this kind of mnemonic for a morning routine that I've written about. I've made videos about that. The 3 M's of a morning routine for me are mindfulness, movement, and mindset. So
I love it.
Again, I'm not saying it's for everyone. Yeah. You know, we all got to find what works for us. But for me, I started with some form of mindfulness practice. Could be breathing, could be meditation, something like that. Some form of movement. You know, I like to do a 5-minute kitchen strength workout while my coffee's brewing. It's a system I've got going.
You stack those habits.
Stack it very, very small. And then the third piece for me is mindset. So I always finish off reading something uplifting or thought-provoking every morning. That's kind of, I can do that in 15 minutes. If I have the luxury of 45 minutes, it can take 45 minutes, an hour, but it can also be compressed if I need to get those 3 M's in. But for me and for many of my patients, they found that that's a very helpful framework to think about starting their day. You mentioned reading, and I know you also, like me, talk about the importance of setting up your environment to make things easy. And so I've always got 3 or 4 uplifting books kicking around my kitchen or my living room. Why? Because A, I'm reading them. B, so in the morning, I don't then have to think, oh, well, what am I going to read today? You know, too much choice, procrastination. I just pick up one of the books that's there. And before you know it, you've read a chapter. So it's, and again, I want to tie in what you just said to what we were saying at the start, which is the importance of the morning. Right? The importance of intentionally setting how your day is going to be. And, you know, you've shared some tools, I've shared some tools, like things that people can think about. Because here's the thing, if you don't, and I get it, some people say they're busy, they don't have time. But the problem is if you start the day reacting, consuming, watching the news, right? Your thermostat is set at a different temperature, right? You everything you experience that day is likely to be affected by that. You know, it's interesting. A few years ago, one of the things my wife stopped doing was watching anything negative, right? So at the time, I was watching House of Cards. I started watching it quite a few years ago now, and I thought, oh my God, this is amazing. I couldn't stop watching. And I said to my wife, I said, hey, Vid, come on, you got to watch this with me. She said, I think she watched about 5 minutes of one of the episodes and says, that is way too dark for me these days. I am not watching that. And at the time I was a little frustrated because I was like, no, I want my wife to watch it with me. But actually, it was fantastic because she has made a conscious decision. And to some people, that's going to be extreme, right? But actually, I think a lot of the things that we regard as extreme these days are necessary because of the world in which we're living, right? If you allow negativity in, don't be surprised when you have anxious thoughts. Don't be surprised when you're up at night thinking about the worst things that could happen in life, right? So again, we've all got to do what's right for us, but she made an intentional choice and she stuck with it. She won't watch dark films. She's not interested. She's like, it may be great, the reviews may be fantastic, but I don't want to have that kind of energy state in my mind anymore. You're a brain coach. What would you say to that?
I mean, it's similar to when people feed their body, right? They could feed themselves some gluten or whatever, and some people are more sensitive to certain things. And I see that no different than you feeding your body certain foods that might be a little bit, some people could enjoy in the moment and everything. And there may be some long-term consequence, but they are willing to accept that. And other people a little bit more sensitive and just saying like, I can't really do this right now, with mine. And so as you feed your body, you could also you're also feeding your mind. And food is information. Certainly. And Netflix is information also as well. And again, it's just I personally don't judge what people do.
No,
and I know you don't either. And it's just, but I do say that if people do that and then complain about something that's coming from that behavior, then I get a little bit like people getting personally responsible.
Yeah. Joe, I want to talk to you about reading a little bit and learning, because you help people read quickly or quicker than they currently do. And it's interesting, one of my cousins the other day said to me, he's quite a bit younger than me, said, I just can't read books anymore. Like I don't have the attention span to read, right? And I think many people feel like that. So they go, oh, it's not for me. And it may not be for them, but part of me feels that just many of us have untrained the skill, or we've allowed technology to overwhelm us and we've now trained ourselves to be distractible.
Right.
I kind of want to know your perspective on that. And then I wonder, maybe it's a good way of tackling this is to walk you through, I guess, my process for getting ready for podcasts, because that generally involves a lot of reading. So I can tell you what I do, and you can maybe tell me how I can improve it. So first of all, maybe we tackle this thing. Are people able to read less than the past?
Okay, so focus, as we're talking about morning routines and touching your phone and doing those things, I think focus is a muscle, right? And I don't think it's something you have, it's something that you do, and you could flex that muscle. And that's one of the reasons why I personally choose not to touch my phone the first half an hour of the day. Because when you wake up in the morning, you know, and you're in this relaxed state of awareness, you're very suggestible. The first thing you do is pick up your phone, which has access to the world's information, and you're just context switching for thousands and thousands of times, and you know, in a very short period of time. You know, you're rewiring your brain, number one, for distraction, right? We talked about that. But you're also rewiring your brain for reaction, right? Because every, I don't know, voicemail, text message, email, whatever, could put you in a mood that could hijack your mood. But in the beginning, like, you know, when you say you want to practice mindfulness in the morning, that's that's not very mindful, right? Just sharing, you know, switching from context.
You mean
to context,
mindfully reading Instagram posts is not that mindful?
Well, even when I said people like, you know, brush their teeth, trying it with the opposite hand, it's not just about, you know, the cross lateral and potentially, you know, engaging a different part of their brain. Yes, that's, but it's also a gateway habit that allows, wow, if I could brush my teeth with the opposite hand, what else can I add in terms of stack my habits? But also, you're not going to be good at it at the beginning, so it forces you to be mindful. So mindfulness doesn't have to be regulated just to meditation. We could bring mindfulness to when we eat, right? We could do it to everything. And then if you're eating with the opposite hand, as an example, right, then it forces you to be present, right? And for me, I like that feeling, as opposed to, you're right, it's not just what you eat, it's how you eat, right? And a lot of people are working while they're eating, so they're not in that parasympathetic rest and digest place. And so they're probably not even getting a lot of, you know, what they could get out of consuming. And I'll go into the reading in a moment. Just on the consumption part, in the morning, like another framework I use for my day, and it's not perfect, right? All these are like little filters. Generally, I like to keep the morning free. And of course, there's other things. Doctor appointments, I have to, you know, do this for my child. I have to do, you know, have this other podcast interview. But generally in the mornings, I like to create. I found for me, my brain mode in the morning is to be creative. So I want to output. In the afternoon, I tend to consume. And that's where I tend to do some study, read for a podcast, listen to a podcast, have conversations with people. I tend to consume information. So I'm putting information in. And then the last, where I create, consume, in the evening, I want to clear. And that's what I'm trying to do. So I want to clear my mind, meaning I want to write down the things I have to do the next day, maybe so I could get it out of my mind so I don't have to ruminate about it. Or maybe I'll use some yoga nidra and just do some breathing meditation to clear, you know, my mind. Or maybe I'll journal and I'll just write it, or I'll talk to my wife and talk about what I did that day to clear my mind.
Fan of journaling?
What's that?
Are you a fan of journaling?
I am.
Why is it good for our brain?
So for me, I journal at two different times. I tend to journal in the morning and in the evening. That's my personal preference. And people could find their own way and figure out what works. In the morning, I have this gratitude practice. I really think it's important. So many people actually will tell me that I'll do a gratitude practice when I have something to be grateful for, and something to that nature. And I was like, okay, that's interesting, because I don't think you have to. And that's what I told this specific person. I was like, maybe you don't have to wait for a greater life to feel grateful. Maybe if you feel grateful, you'll have a greater life. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because I'm always like, just like the responsibility and power and reversing it. I just find that's kind of my thinking style. Because I think that for people to feel, how are you going to have more if you don't appreciate what you have? I know so many people, even clients that have a lot, that they're just not very happy people. Some of them are miserable because they don't even appreciate, the things. And I think if people want to feel truly wealthy, a mental exercise I do is, write down all the things you have in your life that money can't buy. If you could hear this right now, what are you willing to, would you give up your hearing for a certain amount of money or whatever, right? Or a thought experiment like, what if the only things you had in your life tomorrow were the things you express gratitude for today? Not wrote it down, but actually express gratitude for the people or the things, And I just feel like gratitude is just such a healing emotion.
Yeah.
It's just like, it trains my nervous system that there's enough, And I think honestly, my experience has been what you appreciate appreciates, meaning what you appreciate in your life tends to appreciate, meaning it enhances or grows.
Yeah.
And so that's what I want to have it, that makes me feel good. And it also puts me in that kind of parasympathetic. So I tend to do gratitude in the morning and night. And it helps me for me to journal because everybody has a different process than sometimes you can imagine, but I like writing it down.
I mean, I very much echo those views about journaling. For me also, it's a morning and evening practice. In the morning, it's about gratitude. It's about setting an intention for the day. Similar practices, maybe worded slightly differently, about trying to frame the day you want to have. It's about intention, right? It's about not living a reactive life, not being passive. It's about being active and about trying to generate the experience of life that you want. And then in the evening, you call it clearing, which is a really nice way to think about it. It's about sort of reflecting on the day. Like an athlete would always have a coach and reflect on their performance, right? That's how they get better. They assess, they go, yeah, but you can improve here. Yeah. Great, I can tweak it there. That's how they get better, right? That's how they become a high performer. But we all want high performance in our life, whether it's high performance as a father, as a mother, as a work colleague. We all want those things. And so I kind of feel a process of reflection is very, very important for us daily if you can. Yeah. I'm very biased towards analog things, right? I think as the world becomes more and more digital, you've been in my kitchen, you've been in my house, it's a very analog setup intentionally. Yeah. In fact, me and my wife are currently having a discussion about a smart TV. I'm reluctant to get one because I want to make the behaviors that I don't want to engage in myself or I don't want my kids engaging in. I want them to be difficult to do at home. I don't want them to be easy. So I'm saying if we get a brand new spanking TV where things work, currently we've got this old version box where Netflix takes like 5 or 6 minutes to load. It's a bit slow. I love it because that friction to do that behavior will often mean it doesn't happen. Yeah. Right. So as the world becomes more and more digital, I personally like to set up things in an analog way at home, and I like to write in nice journals that feel good. And I wanted to ask you before we go back to sort of reading, like as a brain coach, as a memory coach, as someone who's spent over 30 years now helping people with this stuff, is the act of writing it down in your mind different from typing it into, let's say, an app in your phone? I mean, I've seen some research supporting that it is. Yeah. What's your perspective on that?
That's been my experience also as well, especially with our students and the feedback that we get. We have students in every country in the world, 195 nations, and people vastly prefer handwriting than typing, digital. Let's take note-taking, right? We know that there's a learning curve, but there's also a forgetting curve, that when you hear something on a podcast or in a lecture, you can lose upwards of 80% of it within the first 48 hours. But in order to mitigate that, capturing it, is certainly great. Now, digital is great for storing. It's great for ease of sharing with your team or your family, right, in files. But actually, when students are tested for the things that matter, comprehension, retention, handwriting notes surpasses digital note-taking. And I'll give you one reason why, is a lot of people are pretty good typers, and they could type as fast as you and I are speaking, but you can't possibly handwrite that fast. So what does it do? It forces you to filter. Yeah. Like, is this important, and organize the information? So you're not just Because the worst way of taking notes is having everything verbatim. That's not helping anybody, right? All the research has shown that keywords are more important than just having a transcript of necessarily of given that. It certainly helps to read it, but if you could pull out information and do practice retrieval and test yourself and teach somebody else, you're going to learn it way far better. But I prefer lifestyle more analog because I don't need another reason to get on a screen.
Yeah.
It's a little bit hard when I'm traveling because I like to read. So, I can't necessarily bring 5 books, traveling on it with a carry-on or something like that. But I'm very tactical. And also I do like handwriting because even in just thinking about it logically, right? Leadership or innovation, it's an inside-out process, right? You're taking something invisible in your mind and you're making it visible, like an invention or one of your books, right? Or a podcast. You're taking something in your mind before it actualizes in the physical environment. And I love handwriting something, and I've always been like this, because it's the first step of making something in your mind visual on the outside.
Yeah. If you enjoyed that clip, here's another powerful clip that I think you are really going to enjoy.